The timer rang as I pulled the third pie from the oven. Maple bourbon pecan, Rob's favorite. My hands trembled slightly from exhaustion, the clock reading 4:17 a.m. on Thanksgiving morning. I'd been cooking for nearly 20 hours straight, stopping only for brief moments to gulp down coffee and check my meticulously crafted schedule. 18 dishes. That's what the Wilson family Thanksgiving required. 3 types of pie, 2 variations of stuffing, homemade rolls, turkey with gravy, ham with glaze, 4 vegetable sides, cranberry sauce, both smooth and chunky, mashed potatoes, sweet potato casserole, and my signature butternut squash soup. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I leaned against the counter, allowing myself a rare moment of rest. The kitchen looked like a war zone, mixing bowls stacked precariously in the sink, flour dusting every surface, the refrigerator packed with labeled containers. But there was beauty in the chaos, a sense of purpose. This was my 15th year hosting Thanksgiving at our Riverside home, and despite the exhaustion, I felt that familiar spark of pride. Cooking wasn't just something I did, it was who I was. It was the language through which I spoke love to my family. 3 days before Thanksgiving, Rob had casually mentioned that Ethan would be bringing not just Madison, but also 4 of his connections from business school. They can't go home for the holiday, and Ethan says they're important for his networking, Rob explained while scrolling through his phone, not bothering to look up. Tell me what groceries you need and I'll have them delivered. That's how our conversations typically went. Rob making decisions, me accommodating them. After 26 years of marriage, I'd become comfortable in the role of the agreeable wife, the one who made everything work behind the scenes without complaint. So I simply nodded, recalculated ingredients in my head, and adjusted my shopping list. What I didn't tell Rob was that I'd been planning to try something different this year. For months, I'd been taking online culinary courses specializing in holiday cuisine, secretly dreaming of opening a small catering business. I'd hoped to showcase some of my new recipes at Thanksgiving, my portfolio, a soft launch of the dream I'd kept quiet for so long. Now, with 5 extra guests, I would be returning to the traditional Wilson family menu, a menu that had been dictated to me years ago by Rob's mother, Diane, who had pulled me aside during our second Thanksgiving as a married couple and said, "Olivia, dear, the Wilsons have certain expectations for holiday meals. Let me write them down for you. It's quite specific." That yellowed recipe card, with Diane's immaculate handwriting, was still pinned to my refrigerator 15 years later. I'd followed it religiously, even as I became a more skilled and adventurous cook in my everyday life. Thanksgiving wasn't about creativity. It was about meeting expectations. With Ethan's important guests coming, I couldn't risk deviating from the script, so I stayed up late for 3 straight nights, preparing what I could in advance. The table setting alone took 4 hours, polishing the heirloom silver that had been a wedding gift from Rob's parents, arranging the place cards according to Harold's preference for conversational dynamics, pressing the linen napkins into perfect fans. By Thanksgiving morning, I was operating on pure adrenaline. As I worked, I mentally rehearsed the compliments I received every year. "Olivia, you've outdone yourself again," James would say, though he said the exact same thing annually. "No one makes gravy like yours," Diane would concede, her highest form of praise. Rob would sit at the head of the table, accepting compliments on my behalf. "She's been at it for days, hasn't she? My wife, the kitchen magician." Those moments of acknowledgement were brief but sustaining. They were why I pushed through the fatigue, the aching feet, the burns on my forearms from reaching into the oven countless times. They were why I smiled through dinner conversations that rarely included me because I was too busy refilling water glasses and fetching second helpings. At 5:30 a.m., I finally crawled into bed beside Rob, who was snoring softly, undisturbed by my absences throughout the night. I set my alarm for 8 a.m., barely 2 hours of sleep, but I needed to start the turkey promptly. As I drifted off, I thought about Ethan bringing Madison and his connections. My son had graduated from his MBA program 6 months ago and landed a position at a prestigious consulting firm. I was proud of him, even if he rarely called except to ask for my cranberry sauce recipe or advice on removing wine stains from dress shirts. The alarm jolted me awake, and I slipped out of bed while Rob continued sleeping. I showered quickly, applied light makeup to hide the dark circles under my eyes, and dressed in the burgundy sweater and black pants I'd laid out days ago, festive but practical for cooking. Back in the kitchen, I worked methodically through my remaining tasks. The turkey went into the oven, the ham was prepared for its afternoon baking, and I began the final vegetable preparations. Outside, a light rain tapped against the windows, creating a cozy backdrop to my solitary work. At 11:30 a.m., Rob wandered into the kitchen, coffee mug in hand. "Smells amazing in here," he said, surveying the spread of dishes in various stages of completion. "How long until people arrive?" 2 o'clock, I replied, whisking the gravy with focused intensity. "Can you help set up the extra folding chairs?" "From the garage? We'll need them for Ethan's friends." Rob nodded, sipping his coffee. "I'll get to it." "Oh, and I meant to tell you. Jessica called yesterday. Marco's cousin is in town unexpectedly, so she's bringing him too." I froze mid-whisk. "Another person? Rob, I've already set the table for 15. We don't have another place setting of the good china." He shrugged, as if this were a minor inconvenience rather than a disruption to hours of preparation. "Just use one of the everyday plates. No one will notice." They would notice. Diane would notice. But I bit my tongue and nodded. "Fine. I'll figure it out." "That's my girl," Rob said, patting my shoulder before wandering back to the living room, where I could hear the Thanksgiving Day parade playing on television. I glanced at the dining room, where the table was already perfectly set, crystal glasses catching the light from the chandelier, place cards positioned precisely, the centerpiece of autumn flowers and candles arranged just so. 15 settings, not 16, and certainly not one with mismatched china. After a moment of consideration, I remembered the china serving platter I'd planned to use for the turkey. It was part of the same set and could function as an oversized plate. I'd serve the turkey on our everyday platter instead. It wasn't ideal, but it would maintain the visual harmony of the table. I'd have to rearrange the place cards and squeeze in another chair, but it could work. It had to work. By the time I heard the first car pull into the driveway at 1:45 p.m., I was putting the finishing touches on the tablescape and had just changed into my hosting outfit, a festive burgundy dress that complemented the dining room's color scheme. I'd managed only a few bites of toast throughout the day, but adrenaline kept me going. Harold and Diane were the first to arrive, 15 minutes, early as always. Diane swept into the house, her critical eye immediately scanning the entryway for dust or disarray. "Olivia, dear," she said, air-kissing my cheeks. "The house looks acceptable. I brought my cranberry sauce just in case. You know Harold prefers it with a bit more orange zest than you usually add." I accepted the container with a tight smile, knowing full well it would sit untouched in the refrigerator. My cranberry sauce, both varieties, had already been prepared according to her exact specifications. "Thank you, Diane. How thoughtful." Harold followed behind, handing me a bottle of wine without making eye contact. "Where's Robert?" "In the living room," I replied, but he was already walking past me, headed toward the sound of the football game that had replaced the parade. The rest of the family arrived in quick succession. James and Megan with their teenage twins, Jessica, and Marco with their elementary-age daughters, and Marco's cousin Miguel, and finally, Ethan. My heart lifted at the sight of my son, tall and handsome in a navy blazer. He hugged me briefly, his attention clearly elsewhere. "Mom, this is Madison," he said, gesturing to a stylish young woman with sleek blonde hair. "And these are my colleagues from Anderson Consulting, Paul, Vince, Aiden, and Stephanie." I greeted each of them warmly, taking their coats and directing them to the living room where appetizers were laid out. Madison handed me a bottle of wine with a polite smile. "Ethan says you're quite the cook," she said. "I'm looking forward to it. I can't boil water without creating a disaster." I laughed, appreciating her attempt at connection. "Well, I've had years of practice. Please, make yourself at home." As the house filled with conversation and laughter, I moved between the kitchen and living room, refreshing appetizer trays and making sure everyone had drinks. No one offered to help, nor did I expect them to. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This was my domain, my responsibility. At 2:45 p.m., I announced that dinner would be served in 15 minutes. The timing was crucial. Everything needed to be hot and fresh when it reached the table. I enlisted Rob to carve the turkey, the one culinary task he performed each Thanksgiving. "It's perfect," he said, slicing into the bronzed skin to reveal juicy meat beneath. "You've outdone yourself, Liv." The rare compliment warmed me, and I smiled genuinely for what felt like the first time that day. "Thank you. Can you ask everyone to start making their way to the dining room? I'll bring in the first round of dishes." Rob nodded and left the kitchen. I heard him announce dinner, followed by the sounds of chairs scraping and animated conversation as people relocated to the dining room. I took a deep breath, centering myself for the carefully choreographed dance of serving 18 dishes while they remained at their peak. I carried in the first trays, the turkey on its substitute platter, the boat of silky gravy, the bowl of mashed potatoes so creamy they barely held their shape. Each dish was met with appreciative murmurs as I placed them on the table, moving quickly to bring in the remaining items before anything cooled. On my fourth trip from the kitchen, balancing the heritage green bean casserole and the maple-glazed carrots, I noticed something odd. All 16 chairs were occupied. People were passing dishes, filling their plates, the conversation flowing without interruption. My place setting, which I'd positioned at the end opposite Rob, was gone. I stood frozen for a moment, trying to understand. Then I spotted my china, my napkin, my glass, redistributed among the table to accommodate Miguel and Ethan's extra guests. In the reshuffling, my place had disappeared entirely. "Olivia," Diane called from her seat near Rob, "these carrots look a bit overdone, don't they?" I set down the dishes mechanically, my mind still processing what was happening. "They're caramelized," I said distantly. "It's intentional." She responded, taking a small portion. "Well, to each their own." I returned to the kitchen for the remaining sides, moving on autopilot. When everything was finally on the table, I stood uncertainly near the entrance to the dining room. The family was fully engaged in eating and conversation. Rob was describing a recent work triumph to Ethan's colleagues. Jessica was showing Madison photos on her phone. Harold was already asking for seconds of stuffing. No one had noticed that there was nowhere for me to sit. After a moment of hesitation, I approached Rob and leaned down to whisper, "There's no chair for me." He glanced up, momentarily confused, then looked around the crowded table. "Oh?" he said, his brow furrowing slightly. "That's odd. Can you grab one of the bar stools from the kitchen? We're all pretty squeezed in here already." I nodded and retreated to the kitchen, a strange numbness spreading through me. I pulled a bar stool to the very corner of the dining room, perching awkwardly at an angle to the table, unable to actually reach any of the food without standing. From this position, I was effectively removed from the conversation, an observer, rather than a participant. No one commented on my strange location. No one offered to make room. Madison glanced at me once with a slightly puzzled expression, but was quickly drawn back into conversation with Ethan. I watched as they enjoyed every dish I had labored over. I heard the compliments exchanged, the requests for recipes, the declarations that this was the best Thanksgiving ever. And through it all, I sat on my bar stool, forgotten at the feast I had created. When Rob finally turned to me, it wasn't to check if I was comfortable or had been able to eat. "Liv, can you bring out some more gravy? We're running low." I rose, without a word, and went to the kitchen. Standing at the counter, I stared at the gravy boat I was refilling, and something inside me shifted. A clarity I hadn't experienced in years suddenly washed over me. I had spent 20 hours cooking 18 dishes. I had pressed every napkin, polished every fork, planned every detail of this meal. And yet, here I was, without even the dignity of a proper seat at the table. For the first time, I saw my marriage, my family, my entire life with painful clarity. I wasn't a cherished wife and mother. I was the help, the invisible foundation upon which everyone else's comfort was built. I carried the gravy boat back to the dining room and set it down beside Rob. Then, without announcement, I walked out the front door into the chilly November afternoon. No one called after me. No one even noticed I had left. I stood on our porch, the rain having stopped but leaving everything damp and glistening. The enormous wreath I'd handcrafted for our front door hung beside me, its autumn colors blurring as tears filled my eyes. 15 years of Thanksgivings, 26 years of marriage, a lifetime of making myself smaller, less important, more convenient. My phone buzzed in my pocket, not someone from inside looking for me, but a text from my Aunt Ellie. "Happy Thanksgiving, my dear. Hope you're not working too hard today. Remember to save some joy for yourself." Ellie, my mother's sister, had always seen me more clearly than anyone. After my parents died in a car accident 10 years ago, she had become my only real family, beyond the Wilsons. She lived 2 hours away in Redwood Valley, in the small cottage where my mother had grown up, and though we didn't see each other often, her text messages always seemed to arrive at exactly the right moment. I stared at her message, those last words echoing in my mind. Save some joy for yourself. When was the last time I had felt joy that was truly my own? Not the reflected pleasure of seeing others enjoy what I had created, but something that belonged to me alone? I couldn't remember. From inside, I heard laughter erupting. Ethan was telling one of his business school stories, the one about the professor who fell asleep during finals. It was a good story. I'd heard it 3 times already. I looked at my phone again and did something I had never done before. I called a rideshare, entered Ellie's address in Redwood Valley, and pressed confirm. As I waited on the porch, I felt strangely calm. I should go back inside, grab my purse, pack a bag, tell someone I was leaving. But I couldn't bring myself to re-enter that dining room, to see myself so clearly as they saw me. Or rather, to see how completely they didn't see me at all. So I stood on the porch in my burgundy dress, watching the rain begin again, light and misty. When the car pulled up 7 minutes later, I walked down the path without looking back. The driver, a woman about my age, glanced at me curiously in the rearview mirror. "No coat? It's pretty chilly today." "I left in a hurry," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. She nodded, asking no further questions as she pulled away from the curb. I watched my house recede in the rear window, the golden light spilling from the dining room, the figures moving inside, continuing their Thanksgiving as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I had changed. In that moment when I stood in the kitchen refilling the gravy boat, something had broken irreparably inside me. Not my heart, my illusions. The carefully constructed fiction that had allowed me to pour my life into people who saw me as nothing more than a function, a service, a convenience. As we drove through Riverside, passing other homes where Thanksgiving gatherings were underway, I thought about what would happen when they finally noticed I was gone. Rob would look for me first in the kitchen, certain I was there preparing dessert. Then he might check our bedroom, thinking perhaps I wasn't feeling well. Only after exhausting the obvious places would he begin to worry. Would anyone else even notice before it was time for pie? The thought didn't hurt as much as it should have. Instead, it strengthened my resolve. I would not be going back tonight. Perhaps not ever, at least not to the woman I had been for 26 years. I looked down at my empty hands. No purse, no wallet, no luggage, just my phone, house keys, and the slim gold wedding band on my finger. I had never felt so untethered, so stripped of the materials that defined me. And yet, paradoxically, I had never felt more like myself. The rain intensified as we left the city limits, drumming on the car roof like a heartbeat. I closed my eyes, listening to its rhythm, feeling the distance growing between the Olivia who had risen at 4:17 a.m. to check the pies and the Olivia who was now traveling toward an uncertain future. "It's a long drive to Redwood Valley in this weather," the driver commented, breaking the silence. "Family up there?" "Yes," I said, realizing with a sudden clarity that Ellie was more family to me than anyone sitting around my dining room table. The only family that matters. The car wound through the hills as dusk settled over the landscape. Rain streaked across the windows, blurring the world outside into impressionist patches of color. I hadn't spoken in nearly an hour, lost in thoughts that tumbled like clothes in a dryer. Chaotic, but somehow cleansing. "We're about 30 minutes out," the driver said, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. Her name was Denise. She'd introduced herself earlier, but I'd barely registered it. "You doing okay back there?" I nodded, offering a small smile. "Yes, thank you." "Not to pry, but you left Thanksgiving dinner without a coat or a bag." Her tone was gentle, concerned rather than nosy. "Are you sure someone's expecting you?" The question hung in the air between us. Was anyone expecting me? Ellie didn't know I was coming. For all she knew, I was serving pumpkin pie to the Wilsons right now, smiling through exhaustion as I collected compliments like spare change. "My aunt doesn't know I'm coming," I admitted. "But she'll be there." Denise nodded slowly. "Well, if you need anything, I've got a spare phone charger and some snacks in the glove compartment." Her kindness, this simple human acknowledgement from a stranger, nearly broke me. All day I had moved invisibly through my own home, crafting a perfect holiday for people who couldn't even ensure I had a seat at the table. And here was this woman, offering me a phone charger and snacks, seeing me as a person deserving of basic consideration. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. "That's very kind." We lapsed back into silence as the car continued its journey through the darkening countryside. The rain had intensified, drumming heavily on the roof. I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls. They hadn't noticed my absence yet. Or perhaps they had, but no one cared enough to reach out. I scrolled to my banking app, relieved to see I had access to our joint checking account. I had enough to pay Denise and then some. Beyond that, I didn't know. I'd never lived alone, never supported myself fully. I'd gone from my parents' home to college to marriage, with only brief interludes of independence that had been more theoretical than actual. As we turned onto the narrow road leading to Redwood Valley, memories surfaced of childhood summers spent at Ellie's cottage. My sister and I picking blackberries until our fingers were stained purple. Mom and Ellie laughing in the kitchen, the radio playing oldies as they prepared dinner. Dad dozing on the porch swing, a book open on his chest. The sense of belonging, of being valued simply for existing. My sister lived in Australia now, married with 3 children I barely knew. We exchanged birthday cards and occasional video calls, our relationship cordial but distant. She had escaped the gravitational pull of family obligation, creating a life thousands of miles from what was expected of her. I had envied her courage even while dismissing it as selfish. Now I wondered if she had seen something I hadn't. That the price of belonging as a Wilson was the gradual erasure of self. The car slowed as we approached a cluster of cottages nestled among towering redwoods. Ellie's was the third one, its butter-yellow exterior a warm beacon against the deepening blue of evening. Light spilled from the windows, and smoke curled from the chimney into the rain-washed air. "This the place?" Denise asked, pulling into the gravel driveway. "Yes," I said, my heart suddenly racing. What was I doing? Showing up unannounced on Thanksgiving evening with nothing but the clothes on my back and a phone at 20% battery? But before I could reconsider, Denise had stopped the car and turned to face me. "That'll be $137, $50. I paid through the app, adding a generous tip. "Thank you for the ride, and the conversation." She studied me for a moment. "You sure you're going to be okay?" "I think I will be," I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. I wasn't okay right now, far from it, but the possibility of eventually being okay seemed suddenly within reach. Denise nodded. "Good luck to you then." I stepped out into the rain, immediately soaked by the downpour. Running to the covered porch, I stood dripping on the welcome mat, gathering my courage before knocking on the door. 3 sharp raps, then silence save for the drumming rain. I heard movement inside, a chair scraping, footsteps approaching. Then the door swung open, revealing Ellie in a floral apron, her silver hair pulled back in its usual messy bun, reading glasses perched on her nose. Her eyes widened in shock. "Olivia, what on earth?" "I left them," I said simply, water streaming down my face, mixing with tears I hadn't realized I was crying. "I just walked out." Ellie didn't hesitate. She pulled me into a fierce hug, unconcerned about her clothes getting wet. "Oh, my darling girl," she whispered into my hair. Come in right now." She ushered me inside, the familiar scent of her cottage, books, cinnamon, and wood smoke, enveloping me. The living room was cozy and cluttered in the best way, with books stacked on every surface, a fire crackling in the stone hearth, and her ancient tabby cat, Oscar, watching curiously from his perch on the window seat. "You're soaked through," Ellie said, already moving toward the bathroom. "Let's get you into something dry. Then we'll talk." I followed numbly, emotion and exhaustion finally catching up to me. Ellie pulled out fluffy towels and a set of flannel pajamas that had belonged to my mother, kept in the guest room for visits I rarely made. "Change. I'll make tea," she instructed, closing the door to give me privacy. Alone in the small bathroom, I caught sight of myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. My carefully applied makeup had washed away in the rain, dark circles prominent beneath my eyes. My burgundy dress clung to me, waterlogged and ruined. But it was my expression that gave me pause, a mixture of shock, grief, and something else. Something almost like relief. I peeled off the sodden dress, dried myself with Ellie's soft towels, and slipped into my mother's pajamas. They smelled faintly of lavender, the scent Ellie used in her linen closet, just as my mother had. I finger-combed my wet hair, removed my wedding ring, and placed it on the sink's edge. Then I took a deep breath and rejoined my aunt. Ellie had set up a tray near the fire, a teapot covered with a knitted cozy, 2 mugs, a plate of shortbread cookies, and a small glass of amber liquid that I suspected was the whiskey she reserved for medicinal purposes. "Sit," she said, patting the couch beside her. "Drink this first." She handed me the whiskey. I took a small sip, the liquor burning a warm path down my throat. "Thank you." "Now," Ellie said, pouring tea into the mugs. "Tell me what happened." The story spilled out of me in a rush, the endless cooking, the extra guests, the missing. Chair, the moment of clarity that had propelled me out the door. Ellie listened without interruption, her face growing increasingly troubled. So I just left, I concluded, cradling the warm mug between my hands. No goodbye, no explanation. I called a rideshare and came here. Ellie was silent for a long moment, adding more whiskey to my tea before speaking. They didn't save you a seat at your own Thanksgiving table. It wasn't a question, but a flat statement of disbelief. They didn't even notice there wasn't room. For me, I corrected softly. That's what made me realize. I've become furniture to them. Something useful, but ultimately invisible. Ellie reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman in her 60s. Listen to me, Olivia. What happened today wasn't a small oversight or a simple mistake. It was the culmination of years of taking you for granted. And the fact that you walked out, that you're sitting here now, tells me you finally see it too. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Have they called? Texted? She asked. No, I whispered, checking my phone again. Still nothing, and it had been over 3 hours since I'd left. They probably think I'm sulking in the bedroom or the garden. It won't occur to them that I actually left. And when it does? Ellie raised an eyebrow. I hadn't thought that. Far ahead. My departure had been impulsive, driven by a moment of clarity that had crystallized a lifetime of small injuries into one unbearable wound. I don't know, I admitted. I have nowhere to go, no money of my own, no career to fall back on. You have me, Ellie said firmly. You can stay here as long as you need, and as for money. She hesitated, then continued. Your mother left something for you. I've been holding it in trust, waiting for the right moment. I stared at her, confused. What are you talking about? Mom left everything to you after the accident. The cottage, her savings. Ellie shook her head. Not everything. She had a separate account, money from her own mother, plus what she'd saved from her teaching days. She left instructions that I should give it to you when Olivia needs to remember who she is. Ellie's eyes softened. I think that time has come. Shock rippled through me. How much? Enough to give you breathing room, to figure out your next steps without financial pressure. Ellie squeezed my hand. Your mother saw something in you that you've forgotten, a spark, an independence that got buried under years of being Robert's wife and Ethan's mother. She wanted you to have the means to find it again if you ever needed to. I couldn't process this information. My mother, gone for 10 years, had somehow anticipated this moment. Had she seen in my marriage what I had been blind to? Had she recognized the subtle ways in which I was being diminished long before I felt the pain of it? I don't understand, I said finally. Why didn't you tell me about this before? Because you weren't ready to hear it, Ellie replied simply. You were committed to your life with Robert. You believed that your value came from how well you served others. Telling you about the money wouldn't have changed that. It might have even offended you. She sighed. I had to wait until you started asking different questions about your life. A memory surfaced. My mother, in this very room, during my last visit before her death. I had been complaining about Rob forgetting our anniversary, defending him in the same breath. He's just busy with work. He doesn't mean anything by it. Mom had given me a long, searching look and said, Livy, there's a difference between being needed and being valued. Make sure you know which one you're getting. I hadn't understood then. I'd changed the subject, uncomfortable with her implied criticism of my marriage. Now her words rang with painful clarity. She knew, I whispered. She saw it all along. She worried, Ellie corrected gently. She saw a pattern that concerned her. The way you made yourself smaller to fit into the spaces Robert left for you. The way you measured your worth by how much you could give, even when little was given. in return. My phone buzzed suddenly, startling us both. Rob's name flashed on the screen. 3 hours and 47 minutes since I'd walked out the door. I stared at it, heart pounding. He's calling. You don't have to answer, Ellie said. But I did, placing the phone on speaker so Ellie could hear. Liv? Where are you? Rob's voice was irritated rather than concerned. We're all waiting for dessert. The absurdity of it, the perfect encapsulation of everything wrong with our relationship, made me laugh. A short, bitter sound. Olivia? Are you there? He was annoyed now, the tone he used when I'd inconvenienced him in some minor way. I'm not coming back tonight, Rob, I said, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. There was a pause, then, what are you talking about? Where are you? I left hours ago. I walked out the front door in the middle of dinner. Another pause, longer this time. I could almost see him processing this information, trying to fit it into his understanding of me. Reliable, accommodating. Olivia, who never caused problems. Is this because of the seating thing? Liv, that was just a mix-up. No one meant anything by it. That's the problem, I said quietly. No one meant anything by it. No one thought about me at all. Not even you. You're overreacting, he said, his tone shifting to the one he used when explaining simple concepts to difficult clients. It's been a stressful day for everyone. Just come home, and we can talk about this tomorrow. No, I said, the word unfamiliar, but empowering. I'm not coming home tonight, maybe not ever. There was a sharp intake of breath. What has gotten into you? Are you having some kind of breakdown? Ellie's hand tightened around mine, offering silent support. The opposite, actually, I replied. For the first time in years, I'm seeing things clearly. Do you know what I realized today, Rob? I don't matter to any of you. Not really. I'm just the person who makes everything work, who creates the perfect holiday, who ensures everyone else's comfort while sacrificing my own. That's not true, he protested, but weakly. We appreciate everything you do. Appreciation isn't the same as respect, I said, echoing my mother's wisdom without realizing it. When was the last time you asked what I wanted? When was the last time my needs came first? Silence on the other end. He had no answer because there was none to give. I have to go, I said finally. Enjoy the pies. I made 3 of them while you were sleeping. I ended the call before he could respond, hands trembling slightly. Well done, Ellie said softly. Very well done indeed. My phone immediately began buzzing with texts from Rob. This is ridiculous. Come home now. The family is confused and upset. Where are you staying? At a hotel? Ethan's friends think this is incredibly awkward. I turned off the phone, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. The adrenaline that had carried me through the day was gone, leaving me hollow and shaky. I can't think about this anymore tonight, I said, sinking deeper into the couch cushions. I haven't slept more than 2 hours since Tuesday. Then, sleep, Ellie said, rising to collect our mugs. The guest room is ready. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. I nodded gratefully, following her to the small bedroom that had been my sanctuary during childhood visits. It looked exactly the same. Patchwork quilt on the double bed, watercolor landscapes on the walls, a small writing desk beneath the window that overlooked the garden. Thank you, I said, turning to hug her, for everything. Ellie held me tightly. You're stronger than you know, Livy. You always have been. Get some rest. Alone in the room that held so many memories, I slipped beneath the quilt my grandmother had made decades ago. The familiar weight of it settled around me, like an embrace from the past. Outside, the rain continued to fall, a gentle percussion against the roof. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I didn't set an alarm. I didn't make a mental list of tasks for tomorrow. I didn't worry about anyone else's needs or comfort. I simply closed my eyes and surrendered to sleep, deep and dreamless. Morning arrived with tentative sunshine filtering through lace curtains. For a disorienting moment, I couldn't remember where I was or why. Then yesterday's events came rushing back: the Thanksgiving disaster, my impulsive departure, the revelation about my mother's secret fund. I lay still, taking stock of my situation. I had no clothes beyond the burgundy dress, now hanging damply over a chair. No toiletries, no medication, no identification beyond my phone. I was, in almost every material sense, starting from zero. Yet instead of panic, I felt an unexpected lightness. The burden of pretense had been lifted. I no longer needed to maintain. The fiction that my marriage was equitable, that my sacrifices were appreciated, that the life I had built was fulfilling me rather than diminishing me. I checked my phone, which I'd plugged into Ellie's ancient charger overnight. 27 missed calls, 43 text messages, most from Rob, growing increasingly frantic as the night progressed. A few from Ethan, initially annoyed. "Mom, what are you doing? Dad is freaking out." Then concerned. "Seriously, where are you? This isn't like you." Nothing from anyone else. Not Diane or Harold, not Jessica or James, not even Madison, who had seemed the most aware of my discomfort at the table. I scrolled through Rob's messages, watching his tone evolve from irritation to alarm to a strange, unfamiliar pleading. 10:17 p.m. This is childish and embarrassing. 11:42 p.m. I've called everywhere. Where the hell are you? 1:03 a.m. Please just let me know you're safe. 3:28 a.m. Liv, I'm worried. This isn't like you. Please come home. 5:56 a.m. I'm sorry about the chair. I should have noticed. Please call me. The last message gave me pause. An apology, however inadequate, was rare from Rob, but it was for the chair, the symptom, not the disease. He still didn't understand that yesterday had merely been the breaking point of a pattern established over decades. I set the phone aside, without responding, and went to find Ellie. She was in the kitchen, whisking eggs in a blue ceramic bowl, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she consulted a recipe. Oscar the cat wound around her ankles, hoping for a morsel. "Morning," she said without looking up. "Coffee's on the counter. Help yourself." I poured a cup and leaned against the counter, savoring the rich aroma. "Thank you for letting me crash here last night." "You can crash here as long as you need to," Ellie replied, adding herbs to the eggs. "Though we should probably get you some clothes, unless you plan to wear your mother's pajamas indefinitely." I glanced down at the flannel set I was still wearing. Not the height of fashion, are they? Ellen was many things, but a fashion plate wasn't one of them. Ellie chuckled, using my mother's full name as she always did. "We're about the same size, though. You can borrow whatever you need for now." I nodded gratefully. Rob's been texting all night, calling too. And Ellie poured the egg mixture into a hot pan, the sizzle filling the kitchen. "I haven't responded yet," I admitted. "I don't know what to say." Ellie nodded, allowing me the space to think. That was her gift. She never rushed to fill silences or solve problems that weren't hers to solve. "I need to go back at some point," I said finally. "To get my things, at least. My medication, my identification, clothes." "Yes." Ellie C. agreed. "But not today. Today you rest. You think. You begin to remember who you are beyond the roles you've played for so long." She slid a plate of herb-flecked scrambled eggs and toast in front of me. "Eat. Food decisions are easier on a full stomach." I smiled weakly at the echo of my mother's favorite saying. Ellen had always maintained that most of life's calamities seemed less dire after a proper meal. We ate in companionable silence, the only sounds the clink of forks against plates and Oscar's hopeful purring. Through the kitchen window, I could see Ellie's garden, still vibrant despite the late November chill, kale and rainbow chard, sturdy herbs, and the last of the autumn, flowers. I should call him back, I said finally, setting down my fork. At least let him know I'm safe. Ellie nodded. If that's what you want to do. It's not about what I want, I began automatically, then caught myself. That was the old pattern. Speaking, prioritizing others' needs, considering my own desires selfish or secondary. Actually, yes, it is about what I want, I corrected. And I want space. Time to think without his voice in my head telling me I'm overreacting or being ridiculous. Then that's what you should take, Ellie said simply. You don't owe anyone an immediate response, Olivia, not even your husband. The word husband hung in the air between us, suddenly strange and cumbersome. What if? I started, then swallowed hard. What if I don't want to be married anymore? Saying it aloud was terrifying, like stepping off a cliff without knowing how far the drop might be. 26 years of marriage, an entire adult life built around one relationship, one identity, Robert Wilson's wife. Ellie set down her coffee cup and met my gaze directly. Then you get divorced. It happens every day. The world doesn't end. You build a different life. Her matter-of-factness was both comforting and disorienting. In the Wilson family, divorce was spoken of in hushed tones, as though it were a rare and shameful disease rather than a common human experience. Harold's sister had divorced decades ago and was still referred to as poor Judith at family gatherings, despite her seemingly happy second marriage and successful career. I don't even know if that's what I want, I said truthfully. I just know I can't go back to the way things were. Something has to change, fundamentally change. Then that's where you start, Ellie said. Not with answers, but with boundaries. What are you no longer willing to accept? What do you need that isn't negotiable? I thought about this, really thought about it, perhaps for the first time in my adult life. What did I, Olivia Wilson, need to feel whole and valued? I need to be seen, I said slowly. Not for what I do for others, but for who I am. I need my contributions to be acknowledged, not expected. I paused, struggling to articulate the core of my discontent. You need reciprocity, Ellie suggested gently. A true partnership, not a one-sided service arrangement. Yes, I said, relief flooding through me at having the nebulous feeling named. That's exactly it. I've been treating my marriage like a job, one where I'm constantly on probation, always trying to prove my worth through perfect performance. Ellie reached across the table and squeezed my hand. That's not a marriage, sweetheart. That's a hostage situation. I laughed despite myself, a short, surprised sound. It's not that bad, Ellie, isn't it? She challenged. You left your Thanksgiving dinner in nothing but a dress, in the pouring rain, without even grabbing your purse. That's not a rational decision. It's an escape. Put that way, my actions did seem desperate, even to me. I had fled as though from danger, without thought for practicalities or consequences. I need to text him, I said firmly, just to say I'm safe. Nothing more. Ellie nodded, rising to clear our plates. That's fair, and after that, we're going into town to get you some essentials. My clothes might fit, but I doubt my taste suits you. I smiled gratefully, picking up my phone. After considerable thought, I composed a simple message. I'm safe. I need time to think. Please don't try to find me. I'll be in touch when I'm ready to talk. I hit send before I could reconsider, then turned off notification sounds. Whatever Rob's response might be, I didn't want it intruding on the fragile peace I'd found in Ellie's cottage. Ready? Ellie asked, car keys jangling in her hand. The shops in town aren't fancy, but they'll do for basics. I nodded, suddenly eager to step into the day, to begin the process of rebuilding. Not the life I'd left behind, but something new. something chosen rather than accepted. As we drove into the small downtown area of Redwood Valley, I watched the familiar landscape with fresh eyes. The town hadn't changed much since my childhood visits. The same hardware store with its creaky, wooden floors, the same diner where Mom and Ellie had taken my sister and me for ice cream sundaes, the same towering redwoods standing sentinel over it all. But I had changed. Overnight, it seemed, though in reality, the transformation had been building for years, perhaps decades. I had finally reached the point where the pain of remaining the same outweighed the fear of change. "Where to first?" Ellie asked as we parked on the main street. I glanced at myself in the side mirror, dressed in Ellie's too large sweater and jeans, my hair hastily brushed, my face bare of makeup, a canvas waiting to be defined. "Anywhere," I said, smiling at my reflection. "Let's just start somewhere and see where it takes us." 3 days after Thanksgiving, I woke in Ellie's guest room to the sound of rain pattering against the window. I lay still for a moment, orienting myself in this new reality. The bedside clock read 7:42 a.m., and I marveled at how late I'd slept. At home, at Rob's house, I corrected myself. I would have been up since 5, preparing breakfast, organizing the day's tasks, ensuring everyone else's needs were met before even considering my own. Here, in the quiet of Ellie's cottage, time moved differently. The urgent press of obligation had lifted, replaced by a strange, unfamiliar lightness. I could simply be, without the constant performance of service. I reached for my phone, a habit I was trying to break. Rob had called 17 times yesterday. I'd answered once, late in the evening, a brief conversation that had left me drained. "When are you coming home?" he'd demanded, his voice a mixture of anger and bewilderment. "This has gone on long enough, Olivia." "I'm not ready," I'd replied, sitting on Ellie's porch swing, watching darkness settle over the garden. "Not ready?" He'd sounded genuinely confused. "What does that even mean? You have responsibilities here. The house is a mess. Ethan is worried. Sick." That had struck me as unlikely. Ethan had sent only 2 text messages since my departure, both perfunctory. "Mom, where are you?" And "Dad's freaking out. Call him." "I need space, Rob," I'd said, the words still unfamiliar on my tongue. "Time to think about what I want." "What you want?" His tone had shifted from confusion to incredulity. "Since when do you talk like this?" "I think you're having some kind of breakdown, Liv. Maybe hormonal." "Have you seen a doctor recently?" And there it was, the dismissal, the reduction of my legitimate feelings to a medical or emotional aberration. Classic Rob, unable to conceive. That my dissatisfaction might be rational, might be based in reality rather than some deficiency in me. "I'm perfectly fine," I'd said, a new firmness in my voice. "I'm just finally seeing our marriage clearly." "And what exactly do you see?" he'd asked, defensiveness creeping in. "Inequality. Years of it. Me giving and you taking. Me accommodating and you demanding. Me shrinking to fit the space you allowed." The silence that followed had been heavy, broken only when he'd said, much more quietly, "That's not fair." "No," I'd agreed. "It wasn't fair at all." I'd ended the call then, promising to be in touch when I was ready, knowing it might be a while. Now I scrolled through the messages that had accumulated overnight. 5 from Rob, growing increasingly frustrated. 1 from Diane, my mother-in-law, that made my blood pressure spike. "Olivia, this behavior is completely unacceptable. Robert is beside himself, and frankly, so are we all. Whatever midlife crisis you're experiencing needs to be handled privately, not turned into a public spectacle. Harold and I are extremely disappointed." I deleted it without responding. Diane had never approved of me, had always made it clear that Rob could have done better. Let her be disappointed. I was done seeking her approval. The most surprising message was from Madison, Ethan's girlfriend. "Mrs. Wilson, I hope you're okay. Things were weird at dinner the other day. I noticed you didn't have a seat and wanted to say something, but I didn't know how. Ethan says you've never done anything like this before. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here." I stared at this message for a long time, touched by her perception and kindness. At least someone had noticed my absence, had registered the wrongness of it. I saved her message to respond to later. Sliding out of bed, I pulled on the new clothes Ellie and I had purchased in town. Soft jeans, a forest green sweater, comfortable, leather ankle boots. Nothing fancy, but everything chosen by me, for me, without consideration of anyone else's preferences or expectations. Rob had always subtly directed my wardrobe choices. "That color washes you out, Liv. Don't you think that's a bit young for you? Is that appropriate for a partner dinner?" Gradually, my closet had become filled with clothing that pleased him, but left me feeling muted, constrained, invisible. These new clothes felt like a declaration of independence, small but significant. Downstairs, I found Ellie at the kitchen table, newspaper spread before her, coffee mug in hand. "Morning," she said, glancing up with a smile. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in years," I admitted, pouring myself coffee from the pot on the counter. "Any plans for today?" "Nothing that can't be rearranged," she replied. "Why? Did you have something in mind?" I settled across from her, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "I think I need to go back. Not to stay," I added quickly, seeing her expression shift. "Just to get my things. My important documents, medication, clothes. I can't keep borrowing yours forever." Ellie nodded slowly. "Do you want me to come with you?" The offer touched me deeply. "Yes," I said, "but I think this is something I need to do alone. I need to face Rob on my own terms, without backup. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Ellie said, "but I'll drive you there and wait nearby, just in case." I felt a rush of gratitude for this woman who had become my anchor in the storm. "Thank you." "Have you thought about what you'll say to him?" Ellie asked gently. I sipped my coffee, considering. "Not exactly. I know I'm not ready to make permanent decisions yet. But I also know I can't go back to how things were." "That's a good place to start," Ellie said. "Being clear about what you don't want, even if you're still figuring out what you do want." After breakfast, I borrowed Ellie's phone to call a locksmith. If I was going to retrieve my belongings from the house, I wanted the option to secure them elsewhere. The storage facility on the edge of town had units available immediately. As Ellie drove me toward Riverside, anxiety tightened my chest. I was returning not as Rob Wilson's wife, the accommodating homemaker, but as Olivia, a woman reclaiming pieces of herself that had been subsumed by marriage and motherhood. "You okay?" Ellie asked, noting my silence as we approached the familiar streets of my neighborhood. "Nervous," I admitted, but determined. She reached across to squeeze my hand. "Remember, you can leave anytime. You don't owe him any explanations beyond what you choose to give." We pulled up a block from my house. Rob's house, I corrected again mentally. The colonial facade looked exactly the same as it had 3 days ago, yet everything had changed. "I'll be at the coffee shop around the corner," Ellie said as I got out. "Call if you need anything, and Olivia—" She paused, her expression serious. "You're stronger than you know." With those words bolstering me, I walked the short distance to the house, each step both a return and a departure. The key felt heavy in my hand as I unlocked the front door. The entryway was dim, curtains still drawn despite the late morning hour. The house had a neglected feel, as though no one had bothered to maintain it in my absence. Dishes were piled in the sink. Thanksgiving decorations still hung limply, remnants of a celebration that had become a turning point. I moved quietly, listening for signs of Rob's presence. His car had been in the driveway, so I knew he was home. I found him in the living room, sprawled on the couch in the same clothes he'd worn yesterday, staring blankly at the muted television. He looked disheveled, unshaven, older somehow. My absence had affected him visibly, though whether from genuine distress or the inconvenience of having to fend for himself, I couldn't tell. He started when he saw me, jumping to his feet. "Liv," he said, relief washing over his features. "Thank God. I've been out of my mind." "I'm just here to get some of my things," I said, keeping my voice steady, maintaining distance between us. His expression darkened. "What do you mean, get your things? You're coming home." The statement, not a question, but a declaration, of what he expected to happen, crystallized everything wrong with our relationship. Rob didn't ask. He decided. He didn't collaborate. He dictated. "No, Rob, I'm not," I said, surprised at how calm I felt. "I'm staying with Ellie for now." "With Ellie?" His tone was dismissive. "She's filling your head with nonsense, isn't she? This isn't like you, Liv. You don't just walk out on Thanksgiving and disappear for days." "That's just it," I replied. "You think you know who I am, but you only know the version of me that you've shaped over the years. The woman who accommodates, who never complains, who puts herself last." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "That's ridiculous. I've never asked you to put yourself last." "You didn't have to ask," I said quietly. "It was expected. And when I failed to meet those expectations, there were consequences. Your disappointment, your parents' judgment, the subtle withdrawal of affection." Rob's face flushed. "So this is about the chair? About Thanksgiving?" I said I was sorry about that. It was a mistake, not some grand statement about your value. "It wasn't a mistake," I countered. "It was a revelation. No one saved me a seat at the table because no one truly saw me as a participant in the day. I was the help, Rob. The cook, the server, the cleaner. Not a person to be considered or included." He threw up his hands. "You're reading way too much into this." It was chaotic. People were moving around. Places got shifted. These things happen. They happen to me, Rob. They always happen to me. And that's the problem. We stood facing each other across the living room, the physical distance between us a manifestation of the emotional chasm that had been growing for years. "I need to get my things," I repeated firmly. "Then I'll be going." "And what about us?" he demanded. "What about our marriage? You're just throwing away 26 years over a seating arrangement?" I sighed, seeing the fundamental misunderstanding that still clouded his perspective. "This isn't about the chair, Rob. The chair was a symptom, not the disease. This is about years of invisibility, years of my needs being secondary, my desires irrelevant, my personhood diminished." "That's not true," he protested, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "Isn't it?" I challenged. "When was the last time you asked what I wanted? Really? Asked? And really listened to the answer? When was the last time you saw me struggle and stepped in without being prompted? When was the last time I felt truly seen by you?" He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. The silence that stretched between us was answer enough. "I'm going upstairs," I said finally. "I'll take what I need for now and arrange to come back for the rest when you're not here." "Olivia, wait," he said, moving toward me, his hand outstretched. "We can work this out. Go to counseling or something. You can't just end our marriage." I stepped back, maintaining the distance. "I'm not making any permanent decisions today. I'm just creating space to figure out what I want, what I need. And right now, what I need is time away from you." His expression hardened. "And what about what I need? Have you thought about that at all? The house is a disaster. I have the Petersons coming for dinner next week. A dinner I promised them you would cook. Ethan needs help with his apartment hunting. There it was, the real concern, not my well-being or the state of our relationship, but the inconvenience my absence caused him, the functions I would no longer perform. You'll have to figure those things out, I said simply. I'm sure you're capable if you try. Leaving him standing in the living room, I climbed the stairs to our bedroom. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it on Thanksgiving morning. My side of the bed still neatly made, my robe hanging on the bathroom door, my reading glasses on the nightstand. I moved efficiently, pulling out 2 suitcases from the closet. Into them went essential clothing, toiletries, my medications, the family photo albums I'd meticulously maintained over the years, and the small keepsakes that held personal meaning, my mother's antique brooch, the collection of beach glass from family vacations, the handmade cards Ethan had given me when he was small. In the home office, I located my important documents: birth certificate, social security card, passport, the deed to the small plot of land my parents had left me in northern Wisconsin. I found my diploma from the culinary program I'd completed before marriage, still in its original leather folder, never displayed. As I packed, I felt Rob watching from the doorway, his silence heavy with unasked questions. I'm not taking anything. That isn't clearly mine, I said without looking up. The rest can be sorted out later. This is insane, he said finally. You're having some kind of breakdown, and instead of getting you help, I'm supposed to just let you walk out? I closed the suitcase and turned to face him. That's exactly the problem, Rob. You still think this is about you letting me do something. As if I need your permission to make choices about my own life. That's not what I meant, he backpedaled. It's exactly what you meant, I countered. And it's how you've always thought. You've seen yourself as the authority in this relationship, the decision maker. And I let you, for years. But I'm done with that dynamic. Completely done. I wheeled the suitcases past him into the hallway, pausing at the top of the stairs. I'll text you when I'm ready to come back for the rest of my things. Please don't try to contact me until then. You can't just disappear, he said, anger edging into his voice. We have joint accounts, shared responsibilities. I'll make arrangements for the bills to be paid, I assured him. But I need space, Rob. Real space without your demands or expectations. And what am I supposed to tell people? He demanded. Diane keeps calling. The Petersons are expecting us for brunch Sunday. What do I say? I shrugged, a gesture of freedom. Whatever you want. The truth might be refreshing. Olivia finally realized she deserves better than what I've been giving her, so she left. His face darkened. That's not fair. Neither was our marriage, I replied, starting down the stairs. He followed, his voice rising. So that's it? 26 years down the drain because you had some epiphany over a missed chair? I reached the bottom of the stairs and turned to look up at him, seeing him clearly perhaps for the first time in decades. No, Rob. 26 years of lessons learned, some of them harder than others. I don't regret our marriage. I regret that it took me this long to value myself enough to question it. Before he could respond, the doorbell rang. We both froze, neither of us expecting visitors. Rob moved to answer it, revealing Ethan standing on the porch, hands shoved in his pockets, expression tense. Ethan, Rob said, relief evident in his voice. Thank God. Maybe you can talk some sense into your mother. Ethan stepped inside, his gaze moving between us, taking in the suitcases at my feet. What's going on? Are you leaving? Already left, I corrected gently. I'm just picking up some things I need. Because of Thanksgiving? Ethan asked, confusion creasing his brow. Mom, it was just a crazy day with too many people. No one meant to exclude you. The fact that he knew about the chair situation surprised me. Rob must have explained it to him, which meant Rob understood more than he was admitting. It's not just about Thanksgiving, I said, setting down the suitcase I'd been holding. It's about realizing that I've built my entire life around making everyone else comfortable, often at the expense of my own needs and dreams. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. But that's what families do, right? Support each other, make sacrifices? Yes, I agreed. But the sacrifices should be reciprocal. The support should flow in all directions. That hasn't been my experience in this family. Rob made a sound of protest, but I continued, addressing Ethan directly. When was the last time you asked about my day, my interests, my dreams? I asked gently. When was the last time either of you considered what I might want before making plans that affected me? Ethan flushed, guilt flickering across his features. I don't know. I guess I assumed you were happy with things as they were. Because I never complained? I suggested. Because I always accommodated? That wasn't happiness, Ethan. That was resignation. An uncomfortable silence descended, broken only when Rob cleared his throat. This is ridiculous. Ethan, help me talk some sense into her. Ethan looked between us, clearly torn. Then, surprisingly, he said, Dad, I think Mom has a point. Rob's head snapped up. What? Madison mentioned it on the drive home, Ethan admitted. She said it was weird how everyone just expected Mom to serve and clean up, how no one offered to help. She asked if it was always like that, and I realized, yeah, it kind of is. I felt a rush of unexpected gratitude toward Madison, this young woman who had seen what my own family had been blind to. I'm not saying I was perfect, I told Ethan. I participated in creating these dynamics. I allowed myself to be sidelined, to be taken for granted. That's on me, and I'm working to change it. But right now, I need space to figure out who I am outside of this family, outside of this marriage. Ethan nodded slowly. Okay. I get that, I think. He gave his father a pointed look. And I think Dad needs to get it too. Rob's expression hardened. Don't turn this around on me. I've been a good husband, a good provider. A provider isn't the same as a partner, I said quietly. And that's what I needed, a true partner, not just someone who pays the bills and expects everything else to be handled. I picked up my suitcases again, determination straightening my spine. I need to go. Ellie's waiting for me. Aunt Ellie? Ethan asked, surprised. You're staying with her? For now, I confirmed, until I figure out my next steps. Can I? Would it be okay if I called you? Ethan asked hesitantly. Not to pressure you or anything, just to check in. His request, so simple yet so meaningful, brought tears to my eyes. I'd like that, I said softly. Very much. I moved toward the door, but Rob stepped in front of me, his expression a mixture of anger and fear. Olivia, please, don't do this. For a moment, looking at the man I'd shared my life with for 26 years, I wavered. It would be so easy to give in, to return to the familiar patterns, to accept the comfort of the known over the terrifying uncertainty of change. But then I remembered Thanksgiving, standing in the kitchen, realizing I had been erased from the very celebration I had created. And I knew there was no going back. I have to do this, Rob, I said firmly. For me. Maybe someday you'll understand that. Ethan stepped forward. Dad, let her go. She's not asking for a divorce, just some time. Rob hesitated, then stepped. Aside, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Fine, go. But don't expect me to put my life on hold while you find yourself or whatever this is. His dismissive tone, the way he minimized my legitimate need for autonomy, only reinforced my decision. I don't expect anything from you, Rob. That's rather the point. With those words hanging in the air between us, I walked out the front, door, Ethan helping me carry the suitcases to where Ellie waited in her car down the block. "Are you okay?" he asked as we approached the vehicle. "Not yet," I answered honestly, "but I think I will be." He hesitated, then pulled me into an awkward hug. "I'm sorry, Mom. About Thanksgiving. About a lot of things, probably." I hugged him back, savoring the rare moment of connection with my adult son. "We can talk more later, when things are calmer." Ellie got out of the car to help with the suitcases, nodding a greeting to Ethan. "Everything go all right in there?" she asked me quietly. "As well as could be expected," I replied, sliding into the passenger seat. As we drove away, I resisted the urge to look back at the house that had been my home for decades. Instead, I looked forward, toward the unfamiliar road ahead, feeling both terrified and exhilarated by the uncertainty of it all. The storage unit was our first stop, a small, clean space where I could secure the items I might not need immediately, but didn't want to leave in Rob's house. The locksmith met us there, helping me select a sturdy lock that only I would have. The key, too. "What next?" Ellie asked as we pulled away from the storage facility. I checked my watch. Barely noon, yet it felt as though days had passed since morning. "Lunch," I decided. "I'm starving." Ellie smiled. "A woman who knows what she wants? I like it." We found a small cafe in downtown Riverside, a place I'd often admired but never visited. Rob preferred chain restaurants with predictable menus, and over the years, I'd simply adapted to his preferences rather than insisting on my own. Seated by a window overlooking the river that gave the town its name, I studied the artisanal menu with delight. "Everything looks amazing." "Order 2 things," Ellie suggested. "You're making up for lost time." I laughed, the sound surprising me with its lightness. "Maybe I will." As we lingered over lunch, a harvest salad and butternut squash soup for me, both exquisite, I felt a strange sensation bubbling up from within. It took me a moment to identify it. Joy. Small, fragile, but unmistakable. "What are you smiling about?" Ellie asked, noticing my expression. "I'm just realizing," I said slowly, "that for the first time in decades, I'm making choices solely based on what I want. What food I want to eat, what clothes I want to wear, how I want to spend my time. It's terrifying and wonderful." Ellie reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "That's what freedom feels like, my dear. Scary at first, then addictive." As we finished our meal, my phone buzzed with a text from Rob. "The Peterson dinner is next Tuesday. Will you be back by then?" I stared at the message, incredulous. After everything we'd discussed, his primary concern was still whether I would be available to cook for his colleagues. I showed Ellie the text. She raised an eyebrow. "Tone-deaf, isn't he?" "Always has been," I admitted. "I just didn't let myself see it for what it was." "And how will you respond?" she asked. I considered for a moment, then typed, "No, I won't be back to cook for the Petersons. You might try the new prepared meal service in town, or perhaps cook something yourself. Enjoy your evening." As I hit send, a weight lifted from my shoulders, the burden of always saying yes, of prioritizing others' convenience over my own needs. "That felt good," I said, putting the phone away. Ellie grinned. Independence usually does. After lunch, we walked along the riverfront, the December air crisp but not unpleasant. The town was decorated for Christmas, white lights twinkling in shop windows, evergreen garlands draped along the historic lampposts. In previous years, I would have been deep in holiday preparation by now, ordering the perfect gifts for Rob's colleagues, planning the menu for his office party, crafting personalized ornaments for his family members. Always his. Never. Mine, never ours. "What are you thinking?" Ellie asked, noting my silence. "That I don't have to do Christmas this year," I replied. "Not in the usual way, at least. I don't have to exhaust myself creating perfect memories for everyone else while having none of my own. What would you like to do instead? She prompted. I considered this, the possibility of a holiday structured around my preferences rather than obligation. I'm not sure yet. Something simple, meaningful. Maybe volunteer work? I always wanted to help at the community dinner, but Rob thought it was depressing. Ellie nodded encouragingly. That sounds lovely. And what about gifts? Will you exchange? With Rob? With Ethan? The question gave me pause. I hadn't thought that far ahead. I don't know. With Ethan, probably. With Rob, it feels complicated. Everything will feel complicated for a while, Ellie assured me. That's normal when you're redefining fundamental relationships. As we walked, the sun emerged from behind clouds, casting long shadows across the brick pathway. Ahead, a street musician played guitar, his case open for donations, his voice carrying on the winter air. On impulse, I stopped to listen. The song was familiar, one my father used to play on Sunday mornings when I was a child. For a moment, I was transported back to those simpler times, when I had known exactly who I was and what I wanted. I'd like to take a cooking class, I said, suddenly the idea crystallizing. Something advanced, challenging. I've always wanted to really develop my skills, not just cook what's expected or convenient. Ellie beamed. That sounds perfect. The Culinary Center downtown offers professional-level courses. We could check their schedule. The excitement that flooded me at this small decision felt disproportionate yet entirely justified. It was more than a cooking class. It was a declaration of self-worth, an investment in my own joy rather than someone else's. Let's do that, I agreed. Today, if possible. We redirected our walk toward the Culinary Center, a renovated warehouse, space that housed teaching kitchens, a small cafe, and a gourmet shop. I'd driven past it countless times, always wistfully, never allowing myself to consider actually enrolling. Inside, the space was warm and inviting, the air fragrant with spices and freshly baked bread. A young woman at the reception desk greeted us with a smile. I'm interested in cooking classes, I said, surprising myself with the confidence in my voice. Something advanced, if possible. She handed me a catalog of offerings, pointing out a few options. The winter intensive starts next week, 5 days of immersive instruction with Chef Laurent from Paris. It's our most rigorous program, generally for those with professional experience or serious home cooks looking to elevate their skills. That sounds perfect, I said without hesitation. The woman looked surprised. It's quite expensive, and there's usually a waiting list. But we did have a cancellation yesterday. Let me check if the spot is still available. While she checked the computer, I browsed the catalog, heart racing with excitement. The winter intensive covered everything from advanced knife skills to complex sauce work, artisanal bread baking to modern plating techniques. You're in luck, the receptionist announced. The spot is still open. Would you like to register today? I hesitated for just a moment, thinking of the cost, wondering if I should consult with Rob or at least check our joint account balance. Then I remembered my mother's trust fund, waiting for me at Ellie's instruction. This was exactly the kind of investment she would have wanted me to make, in myself, in my passion, in my future. Yes, I said firmly. I'd like to register right now. The Culinary Center hummed with energy as I tied my apron strings and arranged my knives on the workstation. All around me, other students did the same, some chatting easily, others focused, with quiet intensity. 3 days into the winter intensive, and already I felt transformed. Not just by the techniques I was learning, but by the simple act of prioritizing my passion without apology. Good morning, everyone, Chef Laurent called, his French accent still thick despite decades in America. Today we tackle the mother sauces, the foundation of classical French cuisine. I felt a flutter of excitement. This was familiar territory for me, sauces being something I'd always excelled at, even with my self-taught methods. But learning the proper techniques, the subtle refinements that elevated home cooking to professional standards, this was why I'd enrolled. "Partner up, please," Chef instructed. "You will work in teams of 2 today." Before I could look around, a tall woman with a silver pixie cut appeared beside me. "Care to join forces? I'm Sophia." "Olivia," I replied, extending my hand. "And yes, partners would be great." Sophia and I fell into an easy rhythm, her precise knife work complementing my intuitive understanding of flavors. As we worked on our bechamel, she asked the question I'd been fielding delicately for 3 days. "So, what brought you to this? Course? Career change? Hobby?" I hesitated, still unaccustomed to centering my own narrative. "Something in between, I suppose. Reclaiming a passion I put aside for too long." She nodded as if this made perfect sense. "I get that. I spent 30 years in corporate law before I realized I was miserable. Now I'm 62 and opening a small bistro next spring." Her directness was refreshing. "Really? That's incredible." "Terrifying is more like it," she laughed, whisking steadily. "My ex-husband thinks I've lost my mind. My kids are skeptical but supportive. But for the first time in decades, I'm doing something purely because it brings me joy." The parallel to my own situation was so striking that I found myself confiding in this near stranger. "I walked out on Thanksgiving," I admitted quietly, adjusting the heat under our sauce. "My family didn't save me a seat at the table after I'd cooked for 20 hours straight." Sophia's whisking didn't falter, but her eyes widened. "Well, damn. That would do it." "It wasn't just the chair," I clarified, the explanation becoming more practiced with each telling. "It was the culmination of years of being taken for granted, of making myself smaller to fit everyone else's expectations." She nodded, understanding immediately. "The invisible woman syndrome. I lived it for 30 years myself. Then Gerald left me for his 28-year-old paralegal, and suddenly, I was visible again as an object of pity." Her tone was matter-of-fact, without bitterness. "Best thing that ever happened to me, though I couldn't see it at the time." "How long did it take?" I asked, the question that had been circling in my mind for days. "To rebuild, to figure out who you were beyond the roles you'd played." Sophia considered this as she strained our sauce into a clean bowl. "It's ongoing, honestly. But the worst of the confusion passed after about 6 months. That's when I started cooking again. Something I'd loved in college but abandoned because Gerald preferred simple, bland food. 6 months seemed simultaneously an eternity and no time at all. I was barely 2 weeks into this journey of rediscovery. "The sauce looks perfect," I noted, changing the subject slightly. "Ready for the nutmeg?" As we completed our assignment, earning approving nods from Chef Laurent, I found myself studying Sophia with new interest. Here was a woman who had walked a similar path, who had emerged on the other side not just intact, but flourishing. There was an easy confidence in her movements, a sparkle in her eyes that spoke of hard-won self-possession. "Would you want to grab coffee sometime?" I asked impulsively as we cleaned our station. "I'd love to hear more about your journey, your bistro plans too." Sophia smiled warmly. "I'd like that. How about tomorrow after class? I know a great place just down the street." I nodded, realizing I had just made my first friend in this new phase of my life, one who had no connection to Rob, to the Wilsons, to the persona I had maintained for 26 years. When class ended, I checked my phone to find 3 missed calls from Rob and a text from Ethan. "Dad's on the warpath. The Petersons canceled dinner when they found out you wouldn't be cooking. He's telling everyone you're having a breakdown. Just wanted to warn you." I sighed, unsurprised, yet still disappointed. Of course, Rob would frame my departure as a mental health crisis, rather than a rational response to an untenable situation. It was easier than acknowledging his role in the collapse of our marriage. I texted Ethan back. Thanks for the heads up. I'm fine, just focusing on myself for once. Taking a cooking course, actually. Would love to see you sometime if you're up. For it. His response came quickly. Definitely up for it. This weekend, maybe? And cooking course sounds cool. What kind? The simple interest in what I was doing, the acknowledgement of my pursuits as valid and worthy of curiosity, these small gestures from my son meant more than he could possibly know. I walked from the culinary center to Ellie's car, which she had generously loaned me during the course. The December afternoon was already darkening, the street lamps flickering to life along the downtown corridor. Christmas decorations twinkled in shop windows, reminding me that the holiday was approaching rapidly. In previous years, I would have been deep in preparations by now, ordering custom gifts for Rob's colleagues, planning elaborate menus for various gatherings, coordinating the family photo for cards that were always signed from the Wilson family, rather than listing our individual names. This year, I had made no plans, purchased no gifts, scheduled no events. The freedom was both exhilarating and disorienting. As I drove back to Ellie's cottage, my phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system. Rob's name appeared on the display. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. Hello, Rob. Finally, he said, exasperation evident in his voice. I've been calling for days. I've been busy, I replied evenly. What do you need? The directness of my question seemed to throw him. There was a pause before he continued. The Petersons canceled dinner. They said it wouldn't be the same without your cooking. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, though I wasn't particularly. The Petersons had always treated me as an extension of Rob, valuable primarily for my domestic skills rather than my conversation or company. This has gone on long enough, Olivia, Rob said, his tone shifting to the authoritative one he used when laying down what he considered the final word on a subject. You've made your point. It's time to come home and sort this out. I breathed, deeply, maintaining my composure as I navigated a turn. I haven't made a point, Rob. I've made a change, a necessary one. So what? You're just never coming back? You're throwing away 26 years of marriage over a seating arrangement? We were back to this again, his stubborn refusal to see beyond the precipitating incident to the deeper pattern it had revealed. I told you before, it wasn't about the chair, I said patiently. The chair was a symptom of a much larger problem. And what problem is that exactly? He demanded. That I worked 60-hour weeks to provide for our family while you got to stay home? That I never complained when dinner was late, or when you spent too much on groceries? That I supported your little hobbies whenever you got bored? His words landed like slaps, each one revealing how little he valued my contributions, how fundamentally he misunderstood our marriage. My little hobbies, I repeated slowly. Is that how you see my interests? My passions? The things that make me who I am? Don't twist my words, he backpedaled. You know what I mean. I know exactly what you mean, I confirmed, a new steadiness in my voice. And that's precisely why I left. You've never seen me as a full person, Rob, just as an extension of yourself, a supporting player in the Robert Wilson story. There was silence on the other end of the line, then a frustrated sigh. This isn't getting us anywhere. When are you coming to get the rest of your things? The guest room is full of your craft supplies, and it's driving me crazy having them. Sit there. The abrupt shift from attempting reconciliation to practical logistics was so typically Rob that I almost laughed. I'll arrange something next week, I promised. Is there a day you won't be home? You don't want me there? He asked, sounding genuinely surprised. I think it would be easier for both of us, I explained gently. Less chance of arguments or pressure. He was quiet for a moment, then said grudgingly, I have a conference in Seattle Tuesday through Thursday. I suppose you could come then. Perfect. I'll let you know when. I expected him to end the call then, our business concluded. Instead, he asked in a different tone, almost hesitant, "What are you doing for Christmas?" The question caught me off guard. I haven't decided yet. Why? Diane and Harold are expecting us at their place, as usual. They asked me to check if you're still planning to make the cranberry relish and those chocolate things you always do. I nearly drove off the road in astonishment. After everything, my departure, our confrontations, 2 weeks of separation, his parents were still expecting me to provide dishes for their holiday table? No, Rob, I said firmly. I will not be making cranberry relish for your parents this year, or chocolate truffles, or attending their Christmas dinner. They'll be disappointed, he said, as if this should concern me greatly. I imagine they will, I agreed, unmoved. But I'm no longer responsible for managing other people's disappointment, especially when it stems from unreasonable expectations. He made a sound of frustration. So that's it? You're just abandoning all our traditions? All our obligations? They're not our traditions, Rob. They're your family's traditions that I was expected to uphold, regardless of my own preferences. And they're not our obligations. They're expectations that were placed on me without consideration for my feelings or wishes. You never complained before, he pointed out defensively. No, I acknowledged. I didn't. That's on me. I accepted the unacceptable for too long because I thought that's what being a good wife meant. Subsuming my own needs, never making waves, always accommodating. I don't believe that anymore. We lapsed into silence as I pulled into Ellie's driveway, the cottage windows glowing warmly against the early winter darkness. I have to go, I said finally. We can talk more about the logistics of me picking up my things later. Fine, Rob said tersely. But Ethan is asking about Christmas too. He doesn't understand why you won't be there. A pang of guilt shot through me at the mention of our son. I'll talk to Ethan. That's between him and me. He's confused, Olivia. We all are. This isn't like you. Maybe that's because none of you really knew me, I suggested quietly, including myself. I ended the call before he could respond, sitting in the car for a moment to gather my thoughts. Each conversation with Rob left me emotionally drained, yet increasingly certain of my path. The fact that his parents still expected me to provide holiday dishes despite everything that had happened spoke volumes about how I was perceived by the Wilson family, as a function, not a person. Inside, I found Ellie in the kitchen preparing dinner. The scent of roasting vegetables and herbs filled the warm space. "How was class today?" she asked, noting my expression. "And what's troubling you?" I hung my coat on the hook by the water and joined her at the counter, automatically reaching for a knife to help with the salad preparation. "Class was wonderful," I said truthfully. "I'm learning so much, not just techniques but approaches to food I never considered." I hesitated, then added, "I made a friend, I think. A woman named Sophia who left her husband after 30 years and is opening a bistro." Ellie smiled. "That sounds promising. And the troubled part?" I recounted my conversation with Rob as we worked side by side, the familiar rhythm of cooking together creating a safe space for difficult topics. "Can you believe it?" I concluded. "His mother still expects me to make cranberry relish for their Christmas dinner. As if nothing has changed. As if I'm still just an extension of their family, expected to serve without question." "I'm not surprised," Ellie said thoughtfully. "People resist change, especially when it disrupts arrangements that benefit them. Diane never had to make her own cranberry relish because you always did it. Why would she want that to change?" Put that way, it seemed almost comically simple. "So, what do I do about Christmas? About Ethan?" Ellie sprinkled herbs into the salad, considering. "What do you want to do? Not what you feel obligated to do, or what would cause the least disruption." What would bring you joy this holiday? I paused, the question unfamiliar, but welcome. What did I want? Not what would please Rob, or impress his parents, or fulfill traditions I had inherited rather than chosen. I want something simple, I said slowly. Meaningful. Not focused on gifts or elaborate meals or perfect decorations. I want to be with people who see me, who value me for who I am, not what I provide. Ellie nodded encouragingly. That sounds lovely. And Ethan? I want to see him, I said without hesitation. But not at Harold and Diane's where I'd feel pressured to slip back into old patterns. Maybe I could invite him here, or meet somewhere neutral. You're always welcome to host him here, Ellie assured me. This is your home for as long as you need it. Her generosity touched me deeply. Thank you for everything. I don't know where I'd be without you these past weeks. You'd be somewhere, Ellie said confidently. Perhaps not as comfortable, but you'd have found your way. You're stronger than you've been allowed to believe, Olivia. After dinner, I called Ethan, nervous but determined to begin establishing new patterns in our relationship. Mom, he answered on the second ring. I was just thinking about you. How's the cooking class? His immediate interest in my activities warmed me. It's amazing, challenging in the best way. I'm learning so much. That's great, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Dad mentioned you're not coming to Grandma and Grandpa's for Christmas. I took a deep breath. That's right. I need to make some changes, Ethan. Create some distance from patterns that weren't healthy for me. I get that, he said, surprising me with his understanding. Madison and I were talking about it, actually. She pointed out some things I never noticed before, like how Grandma always criticizes your cooking while eating seconds, or how Dad takes credit for your ideas. Madison's perception and willingness to voice it continued to impress me. She sounds insightful. She is, Ethan agreed, and she helped me see that maybe I've been part of the problem too, taking you for granted, assuming you'd always handle everything. His self-awareness brought tears to my eyes. Thank you for saying that. So, what are you doing for Christmas? He asked. Dad says you're abandoning all our traditions, but that doesn't sound like you. I'm not abandoning traditions, I clarified. I'm just creating space to discover which ones actually matter to me, rather than simply fulfilling expectations. I'd love to see you, though. Maybe we could meet for lunch somewhere? Or you could visit me at Ellie's if you'd like. There was a pause. Then Ethan said hesitantly, What about Madison? Could she come too? She's not flying home until after New Year's. Of course, I said immediately. I'd like to get to know her better. Cool, Ethan said, relief evident in his voice. Maybe we could do lunch on Christmas Eve? There's that new place downtown, the Harvest Table. Madison's been wanting to try it. That sounds perfect, I agreed, touched that he had suggested lunch rather than expecting me to cook. After we hung up, I felt a quiet contentment settle over me. The conversation with Ethan had been a revelation, proof that it was possible to reshape relationships, to establish new patterns of interaction based on mutual respect rather than habitual roles. The next morning, coffee with Sophia extended into lunch as we discovered a natural rapport, our conversations flowing easily from culinary techniques to life philosophies, to our parallel journeys of rediscovery after decades of conforming to others' expectations. The hardest part, Sophia confided as we lingered over dessert, was learning to make decisions without seeking approval. I'd spent so long calibrating my choices to Gerald's preferences that I initially felt paralyzed when facing options alone. I nodded, recognizing my own experience in her words. I still catch myself doing it. Yesterday, I almost bought a sweater in a color Rob would have approved of, even though I was drawn to a completely different one. Did you get the one you liked? Sophia asked. I did, I confirmed, smiling at the small victory. It's bright. Teal, a color Rob always said was too loud for me. Good for you, she said approvingly. Those small choices add up. They're how we reclaim ourselves, stitch by stitch. Tell me about your bistro plans, I prompted, genuinely curious. What kind of place will it be? Sophia's eyes lit up. Small, intimate, just 30 seats, French-inspired but not rigidly traditional. I want it to feel like someone's home kitchen, warm, welcoming, with food that nourishes more than just the body. As she described her vision in detail, the menu concepts, the atmosphere she hoped to create, the community she wanted to build, I felt a spark of something I hadn't experienced in years: ambition. Not the subdued, apologetic kind I'd allowed myself within the constraints of my marriage, but something bold and unapologetic. It sounds wonderful, I said sincerely. The kind of place I'd love to visit. You should do more than visit, Sophia said unexpectedly. I'm looking for a partner, someone who shares my passion and vision, someone who understands food as both art and connection. I stared at her, certain I'd misunderstood. A business partner? But you barely know me. She laughed. I'm a good judge of character, Olivia, and talent. I've watched you in class. Your instincts are impeccable. Your technique solid despite being self-taught. More importantly, you understand what food means beyond sustenance. That's rare. My heart raced at the prospect. I don't have any professional experience or business knowledge. I've got the business side covered, she assured me. 30 years in corporate law taught me that much. What I need is someone who brings soul to the kitchen. She leaned forward, earnest now. Think about it. No pressure. But if you're interested, we should talk more seriously once the course ends. The possibility she'd opened up followed me through the afternoon, a bright thread weaving through my thoughts as I drove. To the animal shelter where I'd begun volunteering on my days off from the cooking course. Working with the shelter animals had been Ellie's suggestion when I'd mentioned wanting to give back somehow during the holiday season. Animals don't care about your marital status or whether you've satisfied social expectations, she'd pointed out. They just appreciate kindness. She'd been right. The 3 hours I spent each visit, walking dogs or socializing with cats awaiting adoption, were uniquely healing. The animals' uncomplicated responses to care and attention reminded me of a basic truth I'd forgotten: that love should be reciprocal rather than extractive. Today I was assigned to the cat room, where I sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by curious felines. A sleek black cat with amber eyes had claimed my lap, almost immediately, purring thunderously as I stroked her silky fur. Onyx really likes you, commented Maya, the young shelter coordinator. She's usually pretty reserved with strangers. She's beautiful, I said, scratching under the cat's chin. How long has she been here? Almost 6 months, Maya sighed. She came in with her kittens after her owner died. The kittens were adopted quickly, but older black cats are always harder to place. I studied Onyx, feeling an inexplicable connection to this dignified creature who had lost everything and started over. Would you like to foster her? Maya suggested, noting my interest. The shelter gets crowded during the holidays, and she'd do better in a home environment, just until we find her a permanent placement. The offer was unexpected, but oddly appealing. I'm staying with my aunt, I explained. I'd need to check with her first. Of course, Maya said. But think about it. Onyx needs a quiet place to decompress, and you seem to have a special touch with her. By the time I left the shelter, the idea had taken root, caring for another being who needed me, not for what I could provide in terms of service, but simply for companionship and basic care, felt like a natural extension of the new life I was building. Ellie, predictably, was enthusiastic about the possibility of fostering Onyx. "This cottage has always had a cat," she said when I broached the subject. That evening. Oscar would approve of the company, I think. As if on cue, her ancient tabby sauntered into the room, regarding me with his usual inscrutable expression before settling by the fire. "Are you sure?" I pressed. "It's your home, and I'm already imposing." Ellie fixed me with a stern look. "First, you're not imposing. You're family. Second, this is your home too, for as long as you need it. And third, if you want to foster this cat, then you should foster this cat. End of discussion." Her certainty made me smile. "All right then. I'll tell Maya tomorrow." Later, preparing for bed in the guest room that had become my sanctuary, I realized that I'd made two significant decisions in one day: to consider Sophia's business proposition and to foster Onyx, without once thinking about how Rob would react or seeking anyone's approval but my own. The revelation was small but profound. Slowly, day by day, I was reclaiming agency over my own life, making choices based on my values and desires rather than external expectations. It wasn't always comfortable. The uncertainty of my future still frightened me in the darkest hours of night. The practical realities of potentially ending my marriage, financial entanglements, legal complexities, social repercussions, loomed large in moments of doubt. But increasingly, these fears were balanced by something even more powerful: the growing certainty that I would not return to the woman I had been before Thanksgiving, the woman who had accepted invisibility as her due, who had measured her worth by how well she served others, who had forgotten that she too deserved a seat at the table. The next morning, I arrived early at the culinary center, eager to practice the delicate pastry technique we'd learned the previous day. The kitchen was empty, save for Chef Laurent, who was preparing materials for the day's lesson. "Ah, Madame Wilson," he greeted me. "Eager to begin, I see." "I wanted to work on my puff pastry," I explained, donning my apron. "Yesterday's attempt was good, but not perfect." He nodded approvingly. The pursuit of perfection. This is what separates the hobbyist from the professional. May I offer a suggestion as you work? "Of course," I said, grateful for his expertise. "Your technique is solid," he said, watching as I began preparing my workspace. "But you are too gentle with the butter. In pastry, we must be precise but not timid. The butter must be cold, the movements confident." His observation struck me as applicable to more than just pastry. Precision without timidity, confidence without aggression. A balanced approach I was striving to embody in all aspects of my new life. I nodded, absorbing the lesson. "Thank you. I'll remember that." As I worked, feeling the dough respond to my more assured handling, I thought about Sophia's unexpected offer: a partnership in a bistro, a professional application of skills I'd honed privately for decades, a way to transform passion into vocation, at an age when many were planning retirement rather than new beginnings. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was, perhaps, exactly what I needed. By the time other students began arriving, my pastry was resting in the refrigerator, the layers of dough and butter perfectly aligned, waiting to be transformed by heat into something greater than the sum of its parts. Sophia appeared at my side, her silver hair catching the light. "You're here early. Eager or anxious?" "Both," I admitted. "I've been thinking about your offer." She raised an eyebrow. And I'm interested in discussing it further," I said, surprising myself with my directness. "I have questions, concerns, but yes, I'm definitely interested." Sophia's smile was warm, genuine. "Excellent. How about dinner next week? My place? We can talk details, share visions, see if we're truly compatible as partners." I nodded, excitement bubbling beneath the surface of my composed exterior. "I'd like that." The day's lesson, advanced techniques in fish preparation, required intense concentration, temporarily pushing thoughts of bistros and business partnerships to the background. By afternoon, I had successfully filleted, poached, and sauced a perfect trout, earning rare praise from Chef Laurent. "You have a natural touch with fish," he commented, inspecting my plate. "Delicate but precise. Very good." His approval, based on genuine accomplishment rather than my relationship to someone else, filled me with quiet pride. I was being seen for my abilities, my dedication, my passion, not as an extension of a husband or a mother, but as a cook in my own right. As I cleaned my station at the end of class, my phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "Hi, Olivia, it's Madison. Ethan gave me your number. I hope that's okay. I was wondering if you might want to grab coffee sometime before our Christmas Eve lunch. Just the two of us? There's something I'd like to discuss." The request was unexpected, but not unwelcome. I had been impressed by Madison's perception and kindness, her willingness to see what my own family had overlooked. I replied immediately, "That sounds lovely, Madison. I'm free tomorrow afternoon if that works for you." Her response came quickly. "Perfect. 3 p.m. at Morning Light Cafe? It's on Oak Street." I confirmed the plan, curious about what Ethan's girlfriend might want to discuss privately. Whatever it was, I appreciated her direct approach, her treatment of me as an individual worthy of one-on-one conversation, rather than simply Ethan's mom. Arriving home, for Ellie's cottage had indeed become home, in a way my house with Rob never truly had, I was greeted by Ellie's excited announcement. "I spoke with Maya at the shelter," she said before I'd even removed my coat. "Onyx can come home with us tomorrow if you're still interested in fostering her." "Really?" I said, delighted by the prospect. "That's wonderful. I'll need to get supplies, a bed, food, toys." "Already ordered," Ellie said with a grin. "Should be delivered this afternoon. I hope you don't mind, but I got a little carried away on the pet supply website." I laughed, touched by her enthusiasm and support. "Not at all. Thank you." The delivery arrived as promised. Not just basic necessities, but an assortment of toys, a plush cat tree, gourmet food, and even a small water fountain specifically designed for feline preferences. "Ellie," I said, surveying the bounty, "this is a lot." She shrugged, unapologetic. "I may have gone overboard, but new beginnings deserve celebration, don't they? Yours and Onyx's both." Arranging the cat supplies in my room, making space for this new presence in my life, I was struck by the symbolism of it all. A black cat, traditionally associated with bad luck and Western superstition, becoming instead a symbol of fresh starts and unconventional choices. Just as I finished setting up the cat tree by the window, my phone rang. Rob again. I considered letting it go to voicemail, then decided against avoidance. "Hello, Rob." "Olivia," he said, his tone uncharacteristically subdued. "I've been thinking about our last conversation." "Oh?" I said cautiously. "Yes, and I think you might have a point, about some things." The admission, however hedged, was so unexpected that I sat down on the edge of the bed in shock. "What things, specifically?" I asked, not willing to assume agreement where there might be none. He sighed heavily. "About taking you for granted, about not seeing the work you put into our life, our home." Ethan said some things that made me think. I waited, silent, allowing him the space to continue without prompting or reassurance. "He pointed out that I've never cooked a meal for you," Rob said finally. "Not once in 26 years. That I don't even know where half the things in our kitchen are kept. That when you were sick with pneumonia 2 years ago, I ordered takeout every night instead of learning to prepare something simple." These were facts, not revelations. But hearing them from Rob's mouth, acknowledging them as meaningful, was new. "Yes," I said simply. "That's true." "I'm not saying you're right about everything," he clarified quickly, the defensive edge returning to his voice. "But maybe we could talk about it about finding a compromise. I considered his offer, aware of the old pattern trying to reassert itself. Rob making a minimal concession, expecting maximal appreciation in return, the fundamental imbalance unchallenged. "I'm not sure I'm interested in compromise, Rob," I said carefully. Compromise implies meeting in the middle, but that's not where we were. We were at an extreme. You taking, me giving. Moving to the middle from there still leaves me with less than I deserve. There was a long silence before he responded. "What do you want then? A divorce? Is that where this is heading?" The question hung between us, weighty with implication. Was that what I wanted? The permanent severing of a bond that had shaped my entire adult life? "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "I'm still figuring that out. What I do know is that I won't return to the way things were. I can't." "So what am I supposed to do?" he asked, frustration edging his tone. "Just wait indefinitely while you find yourself?" "That's up to you," I said, a new steadiness in my voice. "I'm not making demands on your time or patience. Rob, if waiting feels intolerable, then don't wait. Move on. File for divorce yourself if that's what you want." The suggestion clearly startled him. "That's not, It's an option," I pointed out. "One that's available to both of us. All I'm saying is that I need time before making permanent decisions. Time that I'm using to better understand who I am and what I need from a relationship. If you can't respect that need, then perhaps we already have our answer." After a moment, he said stiffly, "I'll give you until after the holidays. Then we need to talk. Really talk, face to face." It wasn't a demand, precisely. But it wasn't far off, still assuming his authority to set timelines for my process of discovery. "I'll be ready to talk when I'm ready to talk," I corrected gently. "Not on an arbitrary deadline, but yes, eventually we will need to have that conversation." He made a sound of frustration but didn't press further. "Fine. By the way, I changed the days of my Seattle trip. I'll be gone Monday through Wednesday next week, if you still want to come get your things." "Thank you for letting me know," I said. "That works well with my schedule." The formality between us was strange yet appropriate, a reflection of the distance that had grown, not just physically, but emotionally. In some ways, we were now more honest with each other than we had been in years, the polite fictions and accommodations stripped away to reveal the true state of our relationship. "Goodbye, Rob," I said after a moment of silence. "Goodbye, Olivia," he replied. And for the first time in our marriage, the exchange felt balanced, neither of us rushing to fill the silence or smooth over discomfort, simply acknowledging the temporary conclusion of our interaction. As I ended the call, I noticed Ellie standing in the doorway, concern evident on her face. "Everything all right?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "Yes, I think so." Rob's finally beginning to understand that this isn't just a phase or a tantrum, that something fundamental has changed. "And how do you feel about that?" she prompted gently. I considered the question, searching for the most honest answer. "Relieved, mostly. That I don't have to keep explaining or defending my choices. But also sad, in a way, for the years spent in patterns that diminished us both, though in different ways." Ellie nodded, understanding without needing further elaboration. That was one of her gifts, the ability to hold space for complex emotions without trying to simplify or resolve them. "Dinner in an hour," she said, changing the subject with characteristic sensitivity to my needs. "I think she likes it here," Ellie observed, watching Onyx explore her new surroundings with curious dignity. The black cat had been with us for 3 days and had already established a routine. Morning meditation on the window seat, afternoon naps in patches of sunlight, evening companionship as I read by the fire. "She certainly seems comfortable," I agreed, smiling as Onyx delicately tested the cat tree, climbing to its highest platform before settling into a regal pose, surveying her domain. December had deepened around us, the holiday season in full swing throughout Riverside and Redwood, Valley alike. Christmas was just a week away, and I had found myself embracing the season with unexpected joy. Not the performative, exhausting kind that had characterized my holidays for decades, but something simpler and more authentic. Ellie and I had spent yesterday afternoon stringing cranberries and popcorn for the garden birds, a tradition from my childhood that I had abandoned when Rob deemed it messy and pointless. We had laughed like schoolgirls when the thread broke, sending berries rolling across the kitchen floor, Onyx pouncing on them with playful delight. This morning, we planned to visit the local community center where I had signed up to help prepare meals for those in need. The volunteer work I had always wanted to do but had never prioritized over the Wilson family obligations. My phone chimed, with a text from Madison, confirming our coffee date later that afternoon. Our lunch the previous day had been surprisingly meaningful, a conversation between equals rather than the awkward generational divide I had feared. "You're smiling," Ellie noted as I put my phone away. "Good news?" "Just confirming plans with Madison," I explained. "We're meeting for coffee at 3. "Ethan's Madison?" Ellie clarified, pleased. "I like that you're getting to know her independently." "So do I admitted. "She's quite remarkable, perceptive, kind, straightforward. She's good for Ethan." Ellie nodded thoughtfully. "The partners our children choose often reveal much about their growth, their healing from family patterns. Ethan choosing someone who sees clearly, who speaks truth kindly, that suggests he's breaking cycles too." Her observation resonated deeply. Ethan had absorbed the Wilson family dynamics just as I had, though from a different position. That he had found his way to someone like Madison, someone who noticed inequity and named it without cruelty, gave me hope that the patterns could indeed be broken, that each generation had the opportunity to do better. At the community center, the kitchen bustled with volunteers preparing meals for the holiday food drive. I had been assigned to pastry duty, using my newly refined skills to transform simple ingredients into nourishing desserts that would bring comfort, along with sustenance. "These are beautiful," commented the kitchen coordinator, examining the apple hand pies I had crafted. "You've clearly done this before." "I've been taking a course," I explained, crimping the edges of another batch. "But I've loved baking all my life." "Well, we're lucky to have you," she said warmly. "Most of our volunteers are enthusiastic but not necessarily skilled." Working alongside others who had chosen to give their time and energy freely, without obligation or expectation of return, filled me with a sense of rightness I had rarely experienced in my years of dutiful service to the Wilson family. Here, my contributions were appreciated rather than expected, acknowledged rather than overlooked. As we cleaned up after the morning's work, the coordinator approached me again. "We're always looking for people with your skills," she said, handing me a card. "If you'd be interested in teaching a basic cooking class for our community education program, please give me a call. It's a small stipend, but the impact is significant." I accepted the card, touched by the recognition of abilities I had long considered ordinary, unremarkable. "Thank you. I'd love to consider it." Driving to my coffee date with Madison afterward, I felt a quiet contentment despite the uncertainty that still characterized much of my life. In just a few weeks, I had begun reconstructing an identity beyond wife and mother, volunteer, student, potential teacher, possible business partner. Each new role was chosen rather than assigned, embraced with deliberate intent rather than passive acceptance. The Morning Light Cafe was charming in its simplicity. Warm wood furnishings, large windows overlooking a small garden, the scent of freshly ground coffee pervading the space. Madison already had a table by the window, her blonde hair catching the winter sunlight as she scrolled through her phone. "Olivia," she greeted me warmly, standing to offer a quick hug. "Thank you for meeting me." Of course, I replied, settling across from her. It's my pleasure. After ordering a cappuccino for me, chai latte for Madison, we exchanged pleasantries about the weather, the approaching holiday, the charming cafe. Then Madison set her cup down decisively, shifting to the purpose of our meeting. I wanted to talk to you privately, she began, about Ethan, and about something I'm considering. I nodded encouragingly, curious but not apprehensive. Madison's directness was refreshing after years of Wilson family communication styles, which tended toward indirect criticism and unspoken expectations. Ethan's going to ask me to marry him, she said, her expression a mixture of joy and concern. He hasn't done it yet, but I found the ring while looking for tape in his desk drawer. That's wonderful, I said sincerely, genuinely happy for them both. He loves you very much. I love him too, Madison confirmed. But I'm concerned about some patterns I've observed. Patterns I think he learned from his family, particularly regarding gender roles and expectations. Her frankness took me aback, though not unpleasantly. I appreciate your honesty, I said carefully. What specifically concerns you? Madison sipped her chai, gathering her thoughts. Ethan is kind, brilliant, and genuinely caring, but he has blind spots. He expects accommodation without realizing it, assumes domestic labor will magically happen without his participation, takes credit for joint achievements. Each observation struck with painful accuracy, not just of Ethan, but of Rob, of the entire Wilson family culture I had participated in maintaining. These aren't major issues right now, Madison continued. We're both busy professionals, living separately. But I worry about the future, about marriage and possibly children, about falling into the same dynamics I witnessed at Thanksgiving. Where I didn't have a seat at my own table, I supplied quietly. Madison nodded, reaching across to touch my hand briefly. Exactly. I don't want that for us. And I don't think Ethan wants it either, not consciously. But patterns are powerful, especially those we absorb in childhood. What are you thinking of doing? I asked, impressed by her foresight, her unwillingness to simply hope for the best. Premarital counseling for one thing, she said practically, but also conversations, honest, sometimes uncomfortable conversations about expectations, division of labor, mutual support. She paused, then continued more hesitantly. And I wanted to ask, would you be willing to talk with Ethan about these things from your perspective? Share your experience, the realities of how these patterns developed in your marriage? The request was unexpected, but deeply meaningful. Madison wasn't asking me to influence Ethan on her behalf, but to share my truth, to help break cycles that had caused harm. Yes, I said without hesitation. I would be honored to have that conversation with him. Relief washed over Madison's face. Thank you. I wasn't sure if it would be too painful, too personal. It will be both of those things, I acknowledged, but necessary, I think, for Ethan's growth and for my own healing. We talked for another hour, moving beyond relationship concerns to share our personal histories, professional aspirations, views on everything from politics to literature. By the time we parted, I felt I had gained not just a future daughter-in-law, but a friend in her own right, an unexpected gift from this period of transformation. Later that evening, as Ellie and I decorated the small Christmas tree we had purchased for the cottage, my phone rang with a call from Sophia. I've secured the lease, she announced without preamble. The space on Cherry Street. It's ours if we want it. My heart raced at the hours, the casual inclusion that still felt startling after years of marginalization. That's wonderful news. When can I see it? Tomorrow morning? 10 o'clock? I'll meet you there with the keys and floor plans. I agreed, eagerly, barely able to contain my excitement as I shared the news with Ellie. A restaurant partnership, she mused, hanging a delicate glass ornament on a pine branch. Your mother would be so proud. She always said your cooking was wasted on people who couldn't truly appreciate it. She did? I asked, surprised. My mother had never criticized the Wilsons directly, at least not in my hearing. Ellie nodded, her expression wistful. Ellen was diplomatic, but observant. She saw how your talents were treated as utilitarian, rather than extraordinary. It troubled her. I absorbed this revelation, this posthumous validation from my mother, as I continued decorating the tree. So many women in my life had seen what I had been blind to. My mother, Ellie, now Madison. Even Sophia, a relative stranger, had recognized my worth more clearly than those who had claimed to love me most. The next morning dawned clear and cold, winter sunlight glinting off frost-covered surfaces as I drove to meet Sophia at our potential bistro location. The space, formerly a bookshop, was situated on a charming street in downtown Riverside, surrounded by boutiques and galleries that attracted both locals and tourists. Sophia waited on the sidewalk, keys in hand, her silver hair bright against her plum-colored coat. "Ready to see our future?" she asked, eyes twinkling with excitement. The interior was simultaneously better and worse than I had imagined. Better, in its bones, its high ceilings and original hardwood floors. Worse in its current condition. Dusty and neglected after months of vacancy. "It needs work," Sophia acknowledged, leading me through the main space toward what would become the kitchen. "But the basics are solid. Good plumbing, updated electrical, ventilation system that passes code." As she outlined her vision, the bar area, the intimate dining section, the open kitchen where customers could watch their meals being prepared, I found myself mentally arranging equipment, planning workflow, imagining the dishes we would create in this space that was just beginning its transformation. "What do you think?" Sophia asked finally, watching my face closely. "Can you see it?" "I can," I said truthfully. "It feels right, like it's been waiting for us." She beamed, clearly relieved. "That's exactly how I felt when I first saw it. Now let's talk brass tacks. Investment, timeline, division of responsibilities." For the next hour, we sat on portable stools Sophia had brought, poring over business plans, financial projections, and design concepts. The numbers were daunting, but not impossible, especially with my mother's trust fund providing my initial investment. "We're targeting an April opening," Sophia concluded, rolling up the floor plans. "That gives us 4 months for renovations, staffing, menu development, and soft launch events." "April," I repeated, the timeline simultaneously intimidating and exhilarating. "It feels fast." "Life moves quickly when you're no longer standing still," Sophia observed with her characteristic wisdom. "Are you in, Olivia? Really in?" The question demanded more than a casual affirmative. It required commitment to a future I was still just beginning to envision, a leap of faith in both Sophia and myself. "Yes," I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke it. "I'm in. Completely." We sealed the agreement with a handshake that felt momentous despite its simplicity. 2 women in midlife choosing reinvention over resignation, passion over security. As I drove back to Redwood Valley, my mind bubbled with ideas for the bistro, potential signature dishes that would showcase both Sophia's French influences and my own more eclectic culinary preferences. So absorbed was I in these pleasant projections that I almost missed the turn for Ellie's cottage, having to brake suddenly to make the corner. Inside, I found not just Ellie, but Ethan waiting, his expression a mixture of anxiety and determination that immediately raised my concern. "Ethan," I said, setting down my purse. "What a surprise! Is everything all right?" He stood, hands shoved in his pockets in a gesture reminiscent of his teenage years. "Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about some stuff." Ellie tactfully excused herself, mentioning errands that needed running, leaving us alone in The cozy living room. Madison told me about your coffee date, Ethan said once we'd settled on the couch. About what you discussed. I nodded, uncertain where this was leading. She's very insightful. You're lucky to have found each other. She said you agreed to talk to me, he continued, his discomfort evident. About patterns, family stuff. Understanding dawned. Madison had wasted no time in initiating the difficult conversations she believed necessary for their future. I admired her courage, her unwillingness to let important truths remain unspoken. Yes, I confirmed gently, if you want to hear it. Ethan nodded, his expression serious. I do, I need to. Madison says there are things I don't see because they've always been normal to me. Ways I might hurt her without meaning to. His vulnerability, his willingness to examine inherited behaviors moved me deeply. That's very mature, Ethan. Self-awareness is the first step toward change. For the next hour, we talked more honestly than we ever had before. I shared my experience of marriage to his father, the gradual erosion of my autonomy, the one-sided accommodations, the invisible labor that went unacknowledged until it ceased. I'm not saying your father is a bad man, I clarified, wanting to be fair despite everything. But our marriage was built on unhealthy patterns that diminished us both, in different ways. Him by limiting his capacity for genuine partnership, me by reducing my sense of self-worth and agency. Ethan listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly absorbing, processing. When I described specific instances, holidays spent cooking for days while Rob watched football, school events where he accepted compliments for projects I had helped Ethan complete, vacations planned without consulting my preferences, I saw recognition dawn in his eyes. I do that, he admitted, distressed. The planning thing, especially. I book trips and just assume Madison will adjust her schedule. I never thought about it as taking her for granted. Most of these patterns aren't conscious, I assured him. They're absorbed through observation, through 1,000 small interactions that teach us what's normal, expected, acceptable. But that doesn't make them okay, Ethan said firmly, and it doesn't mean I can't change them. His determination, his willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, filled me with hope, not just for his future with Madison, but for the possibility of generational healing, of patterns broken rather than perpetuated. No, it doesn't mean you can't change, I agreed. Awareness is powerful. Now that you see these dynamics, you can choose different responses, create different patterns. As our conversation wound down, Ethan asked the question that had clearly been troubling him throughout. Mom, are you and Dad going to get divorced? The directness of his inquiry caught me off guard, though I should have anticipated it. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. That's a decision I'm still working toward. What I do know is that I can't return to the marriage as it was. Too much has changed, not just circumstances, but me. I've changed. Ethan nodded slowly. I can see that. You seem different, more yourself, somehow. His perception touched me deeply. That's exactly it. I'm becoming more fully myself, reclaiming parts I had set aside or suppressed to make others comfortable. Before he left, Ethan hugged me tightly, the kind of genuine embrace we had shared when he was small, but had grown rarer as he matured. I'm proud of you, Mom, he whispered. That probably sounds weird, a son being proud of his mother. But I am. His words stayed with me long after he departed, a balm to wounds I hadn't fully acknowledged. Pride from my son, respect from his partner, professional recognition from Chef Laurent and Sophia, these validations from people who saw me clearly, who valued me for my authentic self rather than my usefulness, were healing in ways I couldn't have anticipated. The week before Christmas passed in a blur of activity, finalizing partnership paperwork with Sophia, completing the culinary course with top marks, volunteering at both the animal shelter and community center, preparing for my lunch with Ethan and Madison on Christmas Eve. I also made time to return to the house while Rob was in Seattle, collecting the remainder of my personal belongings. The experience was surreal, walking through spaces that had once defined my daily existence but now felt like a museum of someone else's life. I worked efficiently, packing books, clothing, personal mementos, and the specialized cooking equipment I had accumulated over years. In the kitchen, I hesitated over certain items. The stand mixer Rob had given me for our 15th anniversary, the copper pots we had purchased together during a rare vacation in France. Eventually, I decided to leave them, not out of generosity, but because they belonged to a phase of life I was leaving behind. The bistro would have new equipment, chosen with Sophia for our shared vision, untainted by complicated history. As I prepared to leave for the final time, I noticed something on the refrigerator, the yellowed recipe card Diane had given me decades ago, dictating the Wilson family holiday menu. I removed it carefully, studying her immaculate handwriting, the authoritative tone of her instructions. Then deliberately, I placed it on the counter where Rob would find it upon his return, a small act of symbolic liberation. Christmas Eve arrived crisp and clear, the kind of winter day that feels magical regardless of one's age or circumstances. Ellie and I had planned a quiet evening at the cottage after my lunch with Ethan and Madison, simple food, exchange of token gifts, perhaps a drive to see the town's Christmas lights. The harvest table, where I was meeting the young couple, lived up to its name: rustic elegance, seasonal ingredients, an atmosphere of unpretentious warmth. It reminded me, pleasantly, of the vision Sophia and I had for our bistro. Ethan and Madison were already seated when I arrived, both looking festive in holiday colors. Madison's face lit up when she spotted me, her welcome as warm as Ethan's. "We ordered champagne," she announced as I joined them. "We're celebrating." I raised an eyebrow, glancing between them. "Oh?" Ethan grinned, taking Madison's hand across the table. "We're engaged, officially as of last night. Though unofficially I've known for weeks," Madison added with a mischievous smile. "He's terrible at hiding things." Joy welled up within me, genuine, uncomplicated happiness for these two people who were approaching marriage with such thoughtfulness, such commitment to breaking harmful patterns before they could take root. "Congratulations," I said sincerely, accepting the glass of champagne a server poured for me. "I couldn't be happier for you both." "We have you to thank, in part," Ethan said, his expression earnest. "Our conversations lately, they've changed. How I think about marriage, about partnership, about what I want for our future." "You did the hard work," I demurred. "Being willing to examine yourself, to question inherited patterns. That takes courage." Madison squeezed his hand affectionately. "He's been amazing. We've had some tough conversations, but necessary ones." As we enjoyed our meal, a stunning array of seasonal dishes that evoked Christmas traditions without being bound by them, I found myself appreciating the symmetry of the moment. Here I was, celebrating a new beginning for my son and his fiancée, while in the midst of my own rebirth, all of us choosing conscious growth over comfortable stagnation. "We have another piece of news," Madison said as dessert arrived, a decadent trio of winter-inspired sweets. "We're not going to Diane and Harold's tomorrow for Christmas." This was indeed surprising. The Wilson family Christmas at the grandparents' home was sacrosanct, attendance all but mandatory. "Oh? What changed?" Ethan looked slightly uncomfortable, but resolute. "I told them we wanted to start our own traditions, that we'd visit the day after Christmas instead for a shorter celebration." The significance of this boundary setting, this gentle but firm resistance to Wilson family expectations, was not lost on me. How did they take it? "About as well as you'd expect," Ethan grimaced. "Grandma said I was breaking your grandmother's heart by destroying family traditions. Dad was more reasonable but still tried to talk me out of it." So what will you do instead? I asked, curious about their alternative plans. Madison smiled. We're volunteering at the community dinner in the morning, then having a quiet celebration at my apartment. Simple, meaningful, focused on connection rather than obligation. Their plans, so aligned with my own evolving values, touched me deeply. That sounds perfect. We were hoping, Ethan said hesitantly, that you might join us. In the evening, after the community dinner. Nothing fancy, just the three of us. The invitation, so simple yet so profound in its implications, brought tears to my eyes. I'd love that, I said softly. Very much. As we finished our meal and prepared to part ways, Ethan handed me a small wrapped package. An early Christmas gift, he explained. Something to mark new beginnings. I opened it carefully to find a beautiful leather-bound journal, its cover embossed with a simple but elegant tree design. Inside, the first page bore an inscription in Ethan's handwriting. To Mom, for the stories yet to be written, the recipes yet to be created, the life yet to be fully lived. With love and admiration, Ethan and Madison. The thoughtfulness of the gift, its recognition of my journey forward rather than backward, moved me beyond words. I hugged them both, too emotional to speak, grateful for their understanding, their support, their love. Later, driving back to Redwood Valley with Christmas Eve twilight gathering around me, I reflected on the extraordinary trajectory of the past month. From a woman rendered invisible at her own Thanksgiving table to a woman actively shaping a future of her own design. Restaurateur, mentor, volunteer, friend, mother, and most importantly, self. The journey was far from complete. There were still difficult conversations ahead with Rob, practical details of separation to navigate, emotions to process, healing to pursue. But for the first time in decades, I was moving forward rather than standing still, choosing rather than accepting, living rather than merely existing. As I turned onto the road leading to Ellie's cottage, snow began to fall. Light, delicate flakes drifting through the darkening sky, transforming the familiar landscape into something magical and new. I slowed the car, savoring the beauty of the moment, the perfect symbolism of the world being made fresh before my eyes. This Christmas would be unlike any I had experienced in my adult life. Simple rather than elaborate, chosen rather than obligatory, centered on genuine connection, rather than performance. There would be no exhaustive cooking, no perfect table settings, no carefully curated gifts designed to impress rather than delight. Instead, there would be quiet joy with those who truly saw me, who valued me not for what I provided, but for who I was. There would be space to breathe, to reflect, to experience the holiday rather than orchestrate it. There would be, for the first time in longer than I could remember, peace. I pulled into Ellie's driveway, noticing the warm glow of lights from within, the simple wreath on the door. The sense of welcome that emanated from this place that had become sanctuary and launching pad both. Inside waited Ellie, Onyx, and an evening of uncomplicated celebration. Tomorrow would bring volunteer work, dinner with Ethan and Madison, perhaps a call from Rob that I might or might not choose to answer. And beyond tomorrow stretched a future I was only beginning to envision. A bistro partnership with Sophia, potential teaching at the community center, a life shaped by my choices rather than others' expectations. A life in which I would never again stand in a kitchen refilling a gravy boat while my place at the table disappeared, in which I would never again accept invisibility as the price of belonging. I stepped from the car into the gently falling snow, tilting my face upward to feel the cool touch of flakes against my skin. In the quiet of the Christmas Eve dusk, surrounded by transformation both literal and metaphorical, I made a silent promise to myself to honor the journey, to embrace the uncertainty, to remain faithful to this new voice that had emerged from years of silence. to ensure that wherever life took me from this point forward, there would always, always be a seat at the table with my name on it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.